The night falls differently on machines that once carried a nation's hunger for speed. In the half-light of memory, the Triumph Thunderbird 6T stands as though carved from the dusk itself, a silhouette of deep blue metal, warm engine breath rising into cold air, exhaust pipes reflecting the last pale shimmer of a street lamp. Listen closely, and you can almost hear it, that slow metallic tick as the fins cool after a long run, the faint scent of hot oil mingling with winter wind. The Thunderbird does not sleep so much as wait, poised between restraint and rebellion. Around it, the early 1950s stir again, a world stitching itself back together, factories humming through the shadows, and riders searching for something that felt like freedom. In that fragile moment after the war, Triumph offered them thunder. As the new decade opened, Britain was rebuilding with weary hands and renewed ambition. Material shortages still lingered, yet desire for modern machines grew stronger than the constraints of rationing. Triumph, guided by Edward Turner's sharp sense of the American appetite, recognized an opportunity. The United States wanted displacement, power, a motorcycle that looked confident even when still. British 500cc singles no longer satisfied the horizon-hungry riders crossing wide American roads. Turner understood that to conquer this market, Triumph needed something larger, smoother, and unmistakably bold. Thus, in Meriden's workshops, engineers shaped a new twin from lessons learned before the war. The result was given a name, chosen not merely for drama, but for intent: Thunderbird. It carried the promise of controlled violence, a rolling storm packaged in polished alloy. But before dealers could place it in showroom windows, Triumph subjected it to a public trial few machines of the era could survive. At the high-banked circuit of Montlhéry in France, under the watchful eyes of skeptical journalists, a blue 6T was pushed to sustain speeds that bordered on defiance. Laps blurred into hours. The engine ran hard, relentless, steady, and when the test ended, it returned with no complaint except the soft ticking of metal cooling proudly. Reporters called it impressive. Riders whispered of its potential. American importers placed orders before the ink dried on the performance reports. But legend rarely blooms from engineering alone. Fate intervened through cinema. Marlon Brando astride a modified 6T in The Wild One, turning the Thunderbird into a symbol of rebellion long before Triumph planned such notoriety. Overnight, the machine became more than a motorcycle. It became an attitude. From 1950 onward, the Triumph Thunderbird 6T would stand not only as a product of its era, but as one of the engines that propelled it forward, a bridge between post-war modesty and the restless roar of a changing world. To understand the Triumph Thunderbird 6T, one must look beyond its polished surfaces and see the intent that shaped every contour. In the workshops of Meriden, engineers were not merely assembling machines, they were sculpting momentum. The 650 cubic centimeter parallel twin at the heart of the Thunderbird was more than an enlarged version of Triumph's earlier engines. It was a declaration. Long stroke, broad-shouldered, tuned for torque rather than frantic revs, it delivered its strength with a steady, rising pull that felt almost tidal. On long American highways, it did not lunge. It gathered pace with the calm confidence of a machine that understood distance. Fins cut deep into the alloy cylinder head, caught passing air like the ridges of some mechanical gill, allowing the engine to shed heat with surprising composure. Cast iron barrels anchored that lightness with durability, forming a union of metals that gave the Thunderbird both stamina and voice. When running, the engine sent a subtle vibration through the frame. Not harsh, but articulate, as though translating the rhythm of its internals directly into the rider's bones. Machines of later decades would aim to suppress such communication. The Thunderbird embraced it. The chassis carrying this engine reflected Triumph's evolving philosophy. Early models used the rigid rear frame inherited from pre-war designs. It was simple, direct, and visually clean, the kind of structure whose limitations became apparent only on rough roads. The front end, with its telescopic fork, offered grace and stability, but the rear transmitted every imperfection beneath the wheels. Yet even this trait became part of the motorcycle's character. Riders of the day understood that speed required compromise. They accepted discomfort as a cost of freedom. In 1954, Triumph shifted course, introducing a swing-arm frame that transformed the Thunderbird's manners. The machine gained not only comfort, but a composure in corners that earlier versions could hint at, but never fully deliver. Suddenly, the 6T felt modern, a machine that could sweep through bends with fluid assurance, its suspension working in quiet harmony with its torque-heavy twin. Details completed the picture, the wide steel handlebars offering leverage and command. The signature Thunderbird blue paint glowing differently beneath changing skies. The chrome twin pipes running low and parallel like the polished claws of a creature built for motion. Even the 4-speed gearbox, with its characteristic mechanical click, felt purposeful. Shifting was not an automatic convenience. It was a ritual, a small choreography between rider and machine. For tuners, the Thunderbird was an invitation. Higher compression pistons, revised cams, freer exhausts, the 6T accepted them eagerly, responding with newfound sharpness. It was as though Triumph had given riders a foundation strong enough to carry their own ambitions. Every great machine eventually finds itself pressed between rivals, expectations, and the relentless march of time. For the Triumph Thunderbird 6T, the early 1950s were a battleground disguised as a golden age. The motorcycle world was shifting beneath its wheels, and each rumble from its twin pipes echoed against a landscape crowded with competitors eager to claim the same stretch of open road. In the United States, the market Triumph had so carefully targeted, the Thunderbird arrived like a bright flash across a heavy sky. Lighter and more agile than American V-twins, it stunned riders with brisk acceleration and a willingness to surge forward the moment the clutch released. For many, it was the first British machine that felt truly capable of challenging the domestic giants. Harley-Davidson and Indian, long unshaken, suddenly faced a foreign contender whose charm blended elegance with speed. Riders who once swore by displacement alone began whispering about balance, weight, and responsiveness, qualities the Thunderbird embodied with effortless grace. But competition sharpened quickly. BSA launched its Golden Flash, promising similar power wrapped in a new sense of boldness. Norton refined its twins, drawing on racing heritage to offer machines that felt taut and impatient for corners. Ariel, with its Square 4 evolving through the decade, presented an entirely different kind of might. Each competitor carved at Triumph's advantage, reshaping the marketplace into a fierce contest of engineering and image. At the same time, Triumph battled shadows, cast by its own unexpected fame. The Wild One had stamped the Thunderbird with the iconography of rebellion, and not everyone welcomed it. Dealers fretted over older customers turning away. Policymakers muttered about dangerous trends among young riders. Triumph, to its surprise, found that a motorcycle can gain notoriety faster than a company can control it. Then came the internal struggles, the quiet conflicts born inside the walls of Meriden. The rigid frame that once felt traditional now seemed old-fashioned against the evolving demands of riders and roads. The introduction of the swing-arm frame in 1954 brought renewed vigor. But by then, Triumph's attention was already drifting toward machines with sharper ambitions. The Tiger emerged with a sporting focus. Soon after, development accelerated toward what would become the Bonneville, a model destined to redefine British motorcycling entirely. The Thunderbird, though respected, began to feel like a proud veteran watching younger talents take the stage. Its strengths remained, but the world around it was speeding forward. Its heat management required care during long-distance American riding. Its electrics occasionally flickered with period stubbornness, and its classic long-stroke nature, though beloved, began to seem unrefined beside newer designs. None of these flaws were fatal, but together they marked the slow dimming of its spotlight. By 1955, the pure 6T Thunderbird faded quietly from Triumph's catalogue, not disgraced, but gently eclipsed. It stepped aside with dignity, engine ticking softly in the metaphorical dusk, as newer machines carried the torch into a faster, louder era. Yet legends rarely vanish simply because production stops. In workshops, in club races, in the private memories of riders who once leaned into the wind behind its bars, the Thunderbird remained, a storm that had passed, but whose echo refused to die. Today, when one encounters a preserved Triumph Thunderbird 6T, it feels less like discovering an old motorcycle and more like opening a door into a forgotten atmosphere. Beneath the canvas sheet in a dim garage, the silhouette still commands a quiet reverence. The proportions remain timeless, a long tank tapering gently toward a single saddle, the twin pipes running low with a predatory symmetry, the stance radiating a confidence machines of its era rarely held. Time has not softened its presence. If anything, it has distilled it. Collectors value the 6T, not merely for its rarity, but for the voice it still carries. A well-tuned Thunderbird does not idle so much as speak. Its exhaust note, textured and resonant, layered with decades of mechanical storytelling. Each pulse of its 650 cubic centimeter twin feels like a reminder that motorcycles once relied on personality rather than precision alone. Twist the throttle, and the engine responds with a rising baritone swell, not aggressive but resolute, the sound of a machine aware of the legacy it represents. Restoring a Thunderbird is an act of devotion rather than hobby. Matching the original deep Thunderbird blue requires patience and a painter's discernment. Polishing the fork shrouds demands hours of quiet care beneath workshop lamps. Balancing the Amal carburetors becomes an exercise in listening as much as adjusting. Those who bring these machines back to life often speak of the process as though they were reviving something with a heartbeat, rather than refurbishing cold metal. And when the restoration is complete, when the key turns, the engine catches, and that familiar rhythm returns, it feels like waking a legend from sleep. The influence of the 6T lives on far beyond collector garages. In Triumph's later designs, from the early Bonnevilles to the modern classic twins, traces of the Thunderbird's philosophy can be found in the clean lines, the modest elegance, the pursuit of a machine that balances character with capability. Even contemporary riders who have never seen a 6T in person often feel its presence indirectly, woven into the DNA of the motorcycles that followed it. But perhaps the Thunderbird's greatest legacy is emotional. It represents a rare moment in motorcycling history when engineering ambition, cultural change, and cinematic myth converged into a single machine. It carried post-war hope, mid-century rebellion, and timeless beauty, all within its polished frame. And though its production years were brief, its impact lingers, not as a thunderclap, but as a low, rolling echo that refuses to fade. So we stand at the end of its tale. The road grows still. The imagined glint of sunlight fades from its blue tank. The engine's warmth settles into memory. And yet something remains. A soft hum. A reminder that machines like this never truly disappear. They live on in stories, in restorations, in quiet garages where someone, someday, will lift the cover and feel their pulse again. If this story still lingers within you, leave a calm word below. A like, a subscription. Sometimes that's all it takes to keep old legends alive a little longer.